literally not the same woman you were 2 weeks ago because your hormones are not where they were. Testosterone is down, progesterone is down, estrogen is down. And so if we understand the natural progression of what's going down as we get to our cycle when our period starts, and we realize, you know what, this is my time. This is my time to be relaxed. This is my time to take care of me. I'm not doing a crazy workout. I'm not doing some crazy intermittent fasting. I'm not pushing myself. This is a time where my body's like, this is about you and up on you. And we begin to see that we understand that there's naturally going to be changes that happen. You become a little bit more insulin resistant right before your period and right at your period. You have a little less stress resilience than you had earlier in your cycle. And we know that we can say to ourselves, you know what, this is a time for me I'm going to walk, I'm going to go on hikes, I'm going to move my body in a way that feels good.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. One of the biggest myths in women's health is that period problems and PMS are just part of being a woman that we have to suffer through. The truth is, while these symptoms are common, there are solutions to help harmonize your hormones to reduce and eventually eliminate these and other symptoms. My guest today is here to talk all about this. Dr. Mariza Snyder is a functional medicine practitioner, women's hormone expert, and author of 8 books, including The Essential Oils Menopause Solution and The Essential Oils Hormone Solution. She's been featured on the Dr. Oz Show, Oprah Magazine, Mind Body Green, and many publications. She's also host of the Essentially You podcast. In this podcast interview, we cover which hormonal imbalances play a role in PMS and period problems, and how to address these issues naturally. The solution may actually surprise you. Mariza, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
I am so happy to be here, girl. It has been so long, and I'm so excited to have the juicy conversation we're going to have today.
Yes, so important. I think with all the problems we have over the years with our periods and PMS, and it's so often women are like, oh, it's just part of being a woman. It's something you just have to suffer through. Mm-hmm. And you and I know we've got to get this out there that you do not have to suffer. You do not have to struggle through these issues, right?
No, you do not. Now, I will tell you, I was the poster girl for period problems from as early as I can remember. And I can speak from my own experience, the ups and downs of the worst types of period symptoms, the bloating, the back pain, the migraines, the just gaining 5 pounds out the gate, all of that. And being told that the only panacea to my period problems was birth control pills. And I remember trying them for the first time when I was finally caved in. They were even being advertised at college. I remember going to college the first day and they were reps for all kinds of different period companies. I was just like, really? And I remember finally just, doing it. And I'll tell you what, the side effects of being on the pill were as bad for me as dealing with the issues that I was dealing with. And no surprise, when I decided to come off the pill, because I think only 50% of women make it more than a year on the pill that first year because the side effects are so crazy, that I got off. And guess what, girl? They can't, all those symptoms, all that stuff I was dealing with, I never addressed it. It came right back with a vengeance. And so I will say that I can speak to this, from my own personal experience, but also knowing that it doesn't have to be that way. It just doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And so often the patients that I see are the women that were put on birth control pills and they suppress the symptoms. And sometimes they just kind of like work their way through it. They put up with the side effects but then they get to the point where they're like, I don't want to be on this anymore. Or they're trying to get pregnant, or they're like, I don't need birth control pills anymore because I think I'm about to go through menopause. And so they're like, wherever they are, they're coming off, and then all their symptoms come back, like you said. So let's talk about it. Like, what are some of the biggest things that you see with the women that you help? And I know with your book and your summit and all the great information you're putting out there, what are the biggest things that are triggering these symptoms? Why do so many women have these problems to begin with?
Such a great question. And there's a lot of root causes. I also want to say that I know it's so easy blame our hormones. You're like, ooh, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol. Ooh, but they're just doing the best they can. And these chemical messengers are relaying information 24/7 to all parts of our bodies. And they are doing the best they can with what they've got in the moment. And they become disrupted because of root cause. And that's the conversation having. I want doctor to be asking you, well, what's going on? Like, what's your stress levels like? How's your sleep? How's your gut health and your liver health? What's going on in terms of the amount of sugar you're consuming every single day? Like, these are the types of root causes that are driving some of these PMS symptoms. But I just want to break down a little bit about kind of our cycle and what we should expect too, because I believe that when we really own our menstrual cycle, especially as we move into our 30s and into our 40s, the more that we understand it, the more that we get how it works. I remember when I was younger, even in my 30s, it's right before my ovulation, right? Let's just say day 18 and a 28-day cycle. Girl, I was a beast. I was fierce. I could do the intermittent fasting. I could do the crazy workouts. I could lift the heaviest. Like, I was so confident. I felt so sexy doing my biggest thing. And then I would get to a couple days before my period, and I would have so much shame and guilt, and I would beat myself up because I was not the woman I was on day 13 of my cycle. Girl on day 27 is not the girl on day 13. I think so many of us are being told, like, you better be girl day 13 every single day. And, when our hormones start to drop down to the lowest of low on day, let's say on a 28-day cycle, on day 28, you're not going to be. You're literally not the same woman you were 2 weeks ago because your hormones are not where they were. Testosterone is down, progesterone is down, estrogen is down. And so if we understand the natural progression of what's going down as we get to our cycle, when our period starts, and we realize, you know what, this is my time. This is my time to be relaxed. This is my time to take care of me. I'm not doing a crazy workout. I'm not doing some crazy intermittent fasting. I'm not pushing myself. This is a time where my body's like, this is about you, up on you. And we begin to see that we understand that there's naturally going to be changes that happen. You become a little bit more insulin resistant right before your period and right at your period. You have a little less stress resilience than you had earlier in your cycle. And we know that we can say to ourselves, you know what, this is a time for me I'm going to walk, I'm going to go on hikes. I'm going to move my body in a way that feels good. I'm going to take care of my nutrition in a way that feels good, so that we can really embrace the fact that our hormones are resetting themselves and the cycle is resetting themselves. Also, part of these PMS symptoms, I wouldn't even necessarily call them PMS symptoms, what is the normal part of our cycle. I think when we understand that is a part, that is a part of the deal, and we give ourselves so much grace in this moment, and we're a little bit selfish in this moment, then we begin to realize this is a part of the superpower. Now, when our hormones are not working properly, let's say that there's a disconnect between progesterone and estrogen in this part of the cycle, ideally day 21, day 22 of the luteal phase of our cycle, progesterone and estradiol are at their peak in this particular part of the cycle. And normally it's supposed to be progesterone, it's 100-1, progesterone to estradiol. But if for some reason that is not the case, whether it's because we didn't ovulate, or ovulation is the main event, or it's because there's some other external factors going on, then we start to see some of those disruptive symptoms. And so I just speak into what are the drivers for that imbalance, and then what we can do to kind of address, combat that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for women who don't have the typical 28-day cycle,
Yes.
what do
Yes.
you say for women? Because there are a lot of women, especially as we get closer to menopause, that's even, in your 30s, 40s, it can start to change. And women
Yeah.
with PCOS, for example, they have kind of very irregular cycles. So what do you tell these women that have more irregular cycles?
As well, especially if we're heading into perimenopause. And let's just identify that that can be a 10 to 15 year transition. It can start as early as your mid 30s. I know for me that was very much the case. And within that time, as things start to shift, what could be experiencing is you're having anovulatory cycles, meaning that you're not ovulating every single cycle. And in order to get progesterone, which is, a hormone we very much take for granted, she's like the ultimate chill pill, the sleep dote, quells anxiety. She creates stress resilience for us. Man, she is a rock star. If we don't ovulate that month, we don't have the corpus luteum to produce that progesterone. And so we just may have progesterone to get us through that phase. That's where those PMS symptoms can happen. With PCOS, I mean, we're dealing with insulin resistance and hormone changes because of that. And so, you kind of combine those two as we move into our 30s into our 40s, you're going to start to see, yes, cycles that may have been 30 days or 29 days or 28 days are going to become shorter. You may notice that the luteal phase of your cycle in particular is shortening. You also may notice that symptoms are happening all of a sudden. Again, what felt like things that you could conquer really easily, things that you could deal with easily, feel a little bit more triggering, feel a little bit more edgy. You may notice that your period is spotting or inconsistent, especially in that second part of your cycle. You may also notice that weight is coming on, a little bit easier, that workouts are not as easy as they used to be. Like that resilience across the board is beginning to struggle. Part of this is the fact that things are just shifting and changing as we get closer to menopause. The other part of it is it's the environmental factors, it's the stressors that are coming in. And that's a part I think we really got to analyze. One, is it insulin resistance? And I think a lot of women, I would say well over 80% of women in their 40s are dealing with some level of insulin resistance that's playing a role here. And we can talk a little bit about like, how do we address that big elephant in the room that no one's talking about? The other part for me, it was not only insulin resistance. I was riding the blood sugar roller coaster forever. And I just thought it was chronic fatigue, or I thought it was high, crazy cortisol levels. I thought I was dealing with a lot of stress. And it probably was a combination of things. But the one thing that wasn't on my radar was the insulin issue or the deregulated blood sugar issues. I think a big player here that we're just not looking at, because unless you've got prediabetes or diabetes, we just don't talk about it. It's not even going to look at your hemoglobin A1C. We're good to go. And I think those are some things we got to be looking at. The other two areas I think are major players here is going to be your gut health and your liver health. How are we managing and packaging and detoxifying hormone metabolites, estrogen metabolites, cortisol metabolites? Like, are those systems working properly? How's your gut health? How's your liver doing? If those aren't optimized as well, you're going to feel those PMS symptoms. We're going to feel bloated when a week before our period. We're going to headachy. We're going to have the lumpy, tender breasts and the heavy periods. Those are going to be happening as well. So I think especially when we move into perimenopause, what can feel like that storm is a combination of things. Not only is the natural progression of our hormones dropping, particularly estrogen and testosterone in the beginning, and then the roller coaster of estrogen towards the end, but then we've got all these factors. We've got, well, how's our gut? How's our liver? What's going on with our blood glucose regulation? And then what's our stress levels like? And what are the toxins that we're dealing with on the day to day? And I know that can feel like a lot, but it very much is a culmination of multiple things. And what I will say is that these panaceas that often were being recommended or were being prescribed, girl, it ain't gonna fix your gut. It ain't gonna deal with the sluggish liver. It's definitely not gonna deal with you overly triggered, and it's gonna fix if you're doing late night snacks or mid afternoon snacks just to get through the rest of your day. And so we've got to start to dissect and look at the big players here. And although that feels like a lot, there's a couple places that we can start and really make some great gains as we're through these transitional years.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's break down some of those a little bit. Let's talk
Yeah.
about blood sugar and insulin. The insulin is a hormone that people a lot of times don't even think about as a hormone, but all the things you're doing to throw off your hormones, that includes insulin. So we've got to balance our blood sugar so we can help insulin do its job. So what are some of the things that you find or you found to be particularly important when it comes to balancing blood sugar, helping support insulin?
Where I definitely had insulin resistance, family with type 2 diabetes, and looking back at my lifestyle, thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, if I had a continuous glucose monitor in my 20s, girl, I think it would have been spiking and crashing 24/7. I think a lot of us don't realize how deregulated or how variable blood sugar is. It's 90% of adults experience blood sugar spikes, the equivalent of someone having type 2 diabetes. And every time you have one of those spikes above 140 milligrams per deciliter, it is an inflammatory response. Your body has to go into SOS mode every single time. And what it can feel like, the top three symptoms of blood sugar deregulation when you hit a spike and crash is you're feeling hungry. Like you had breakfast, you've got crazy cravings, especially mid afternoon and late night. And then also you're lagging on energy. All of a sudden you just hit a wall at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're experiencing those three things or one of those three things, there's a good chance that you're a part of that 90% of people who are experiencing blood sugar spikes. And so the name of the game is to get that blood sugar level as straight as possible, as stable as possible. And here are my go-to hacks that I personally use every single day. Because I'll tell you what, Trevor, I have very little, I got no wiggle room. Either it's genetics or it is what I did in my 20s. But I will tell you right now, if I were to eat a sweet potato right now, I would blow my blood sugar up. That is how little wiggle room I've got. And so every day I am really conscious of how I take care of my body. I know it has an impact on my hormones. I know it has an impact on my metabolism. Importantly, where I notice it is how my brain functions. If I fire off that deregulation, if I spike my blood sugar, you could just kiss my brain goodbye. You might as well throw it in the trash can at that day because it doesn't work anymore. I call it like glitching out.
That, right? You're not alone with that because so many people have that issue. It's funny. I've started to realize about blood sugar when I was in my 20s. I think I was probably right around like 22 years old. And I had breakfast. I had pancakes with Aunt Jemima syrup, and bananas.
Ooh.
And then after I ate it, I felt horrible. And I was like, why is my energy crashing? Why do I feel dizzy? Why do I feel all of these things? I felt irritable, all these things. So I went in to see the doctor thinking there's something wrong with my blood sugar. And so I had the doctor like, can you test my blood sugar? What's going on? And he was like, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. He never asked me, so what did you have to eat?
What did you have dessert for breakfast, girl? You know what I'm saying? Like how many of you had dessert for breakfast? And that's one of my first rules here is please do not have dessert for breakfast. I'm talking about muffins, bagels with cream cheese, Pop-Tarts. I'm talking about free smoothies, acai bowls, sugar in your coffee. The list can go on. I can keep on going. Your first meal of the day, whenever you break your, whether it's 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. or 9 a.m., whenever it is, it's got to be savory. It's got to be protein focused. It's got to be veggie focused, fiber focused. I mean, fiber is the name of the game here, and it's got to be healthy fat focused. And so how we do it is it's leftovers. I have halibut in the fridge right now with some pesto. I've got a sexy salad ready to go with chopped up veggies and some olive oil, a little bit of red wine vinegar, and that's going to be breakfast for me. And so again, focus on savory because your doctor didn't tell you, and what no one tells you is if you have dessert for breakfast, it will take 48 hours for your body to recover from that meal. And so even if you have a fish salad for lunch and you have, fish and veggies for dinner, you're still going to spike later on that day because you have deregulated your sugar earlier in the morning. I think about like all the Europeans, we made a trip, we're going to Italy in October, and breakfast is a croissant and it's coffee. You know what I'm saying? I was thinking about, oh my gosh, like how many people every day are just setting their blood sugar up for a major poster that it's almost impossible for getting on. And then if we just do that every morning, you're just tag teaming against it. So that's the first hack is savory, breakfast. Savory breakfast. And it's focusing on that trifecta to feed your gut, to love your liver, to give your hormones what they need. Protein focus, tons and tons of fiber, rich vegetables, and healthy fats. Then the next thing I recommend is never eat dessert naked. Always have dessert on the back end of a super robust, savory meal. You want to eat your dessert? I would say the ideal time is usually after lunch, after you've had that super savory lunch with all of those aspects that I talked about. And then if you really want to ensure that your blood sugar stays stable, is walk immediately. Get outside and walk. Probably the most underrated thing that we can do for our health every day, especially us as women, is walk after dinner or walk after any meal, especially after dinner, because naturally we're just more insulin resistant. One of the things I learned, Trevor, is if I eat after 7, even if it's a savory meal, even if I check all the boxes, I am going to have a bigger blood sugar spike. Not a massive spike by any means, but what would have been in my ideal range, it's now a little bit higher because my body's like, hey, it's bedtime. It is time to wind down. We are not trying to do the down your food right now. My body's like, can we chill out? Can we read a book? Something like that. So we moved dinner time to before 6 p.m. It's perfect because my toddler eats at 5:30 anyway. And then because Kingston goes down at 7 p.m., we go and we walk around 6:15. We take a walk to the beach and back. So I don't have a CGM on right now, but we watch it and we'll watch it go up. And then we take that walk and it just slides right back down into the 90s. And so you don't need a CGM to do these things, by the way. You don't need a continuous glucose monitor, but it's just fun to see it in real time. But take a walk after your meal, walk your dog, walk your partner, walk yourself. You know what I'm saying? Other things to think about is as long as you're not pregnant or breastfeeding, berberine is a great option. 500 milligrams of berberine before your meal or right after your meal. And if you're cool with it too, you could also do this with apple cider vinegar, a little shot of apple cider vinegar in a 4-ounce glass of water. You can drink it. I recommend a straw so you don't mess up with your teeth enamel, but both of these will drop sugars by 30%. So you can have your cake and eat it too. I will say that I'm not a big fan of drinking vinegar before I have cake, but that's just me. Those are just some strategies. And then the other thing that I love to do is at least a circadian fast, 12 hours. So the last thing you eat is dinner. So we usually eat dinner at 6 or before 6, and then we have breakfast at 10. So we that's a little bit longer than a 12-hour fast, but 6 to 6 would be a 12-hour fast. 6 to 8 would be 14, 6 to 10 would be 16. And so, just figuring out that space, but giving your mitochondria, giving your insulin levels, giving your hormones, your metabolism, your gut, your liver, just give your body that opportunity to just clear shop, clean up, reset. These are all phenomenal ways, not only to extend longevity, but also to ensure that you've got balanced blood sugar levels for as long as possible. And this becomes so critical for us as we begin to lose the protection of our sex hormones, which we are. It's just the way it is. It's inevitable that we will lose. We can boost up our metabolic function. We can boost up our insulin sensitivity so that we are able to transition through that period from our 30s, 40s into our 50s. We don't have to call it perimenopause and menopause. We just call it decades. And we can move through those with so much more grace and ease. That stubborn belly fat, we don't have to have it. The crazy brain fog and low energy, we don't have to have it. If we boost up those mitochondria, we can move through that change in hormone levels, the decrease and decline of ovarian function with a lot more grace. Now, do I also think we should do a little bit of hormone action? Yeah, I think so. But we need to dial in that metabolism more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And so going back to PMS and period problems, how does blood sugar play a role in that? Why is this going to help? Explain to people why this helps.
It's everything. It's everything. I mean, if there was an area to focus on, first and foremost, if you are having period problems and you're looking for the culprit, blood sugar is the first place I would start. Metabolism is the first place I would start. And the cool thing about it is that when you are focusing on the foods to nourish your gut, nourish your liver, stabilize your blood sugar, it's like the trifecta of ensuring that your hormones are working properly. It's allowing, I call it just eating a metabolically healthy, metabolically and hormone loving rich diet. And that begins to address, so what happens with insulin resistance, right? We know that not only is that going to throw us off metabolically, so we're going to have, in terms of our menstrual cycle, our ovarian cycle, it's probably one of the most metabolically driven activities that our bodies do every single month. And you know it is true because you feel it. You're like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. It is. It's exhausting to prime your body up every single month to have a baby. Just priming the body up to have a baby is an exhausting process, let alone getting pregnant and making a baby, building a baby, and so if we don't have the right resources, if our mitochondria aren't robust, if our cells are being gunked up with too much glucose cannot process, ooh, one of the first systems that are going to start to show is going to be your menstrual cycle. It's going to be your ovulatory cycle. You'll start to notice, PMS symptoms. You'll start to notice, maybe even if it gets to a severe extent, you're talking about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, where it has an impact on testosterone, our androgen hormones. It raises estrogen. We end up having to create more estrogen. We become more estrogen dominant. And that's probably one of the first things I see. I will see estrogen dominance before I will see PCOS. It's not usually identified. It's not usually caught or diagnosed, but all of a sudden women are having, again, the migraines, the painful, dense breasts, the heavy periods, the PMS symptoms, the bloating, the weight gain. These are all those classic signs, breakouts. Those what I'll normally see. It's because we know that when insulin is high or deregulated, we start to see an increase in estradiol as well. So that's one of the first areas we'll see it. So an increase in insulin resistance and blood sugar deregulation often leads to PMS symptoms.
Yeah. And as you talk about in the Hormones, Health and Harmony docuseries, periods are one of our vital signs. Mm-hmm. We need to look at our periods as not just something that's a pain, but is something that actually is giving us information. If we're having healthy, normal periods, and, everyone's different in what normal means for you or what optimal is for you. Some women might have a longer cycle and that's okay. You might, bleed a little bit longer than someone else or shorter, and that's okay, or shorter cycles, but we don't want them to be interfering with our lives. We don't want to be in so much pain that we're having to take time off work, or we can't take care of our kids or whatever it is. Or we're so moody that we're snapping at people all around us, or feel so bloated that we just feel like we're beating ourselves up. Right. So, okay. So gut health is another thing that you brought up, and that one is also really important.
Mm-hmm. It is. And and again, it's a lot of what we're doing to feed the gut is going to support the liver too. And so as I talked about that metabolically healthy meal, one of the first steps is really ensuring that we're getting a diverse array of fiber via veggies and fruits. And so, I think that always starts at the grocery store, of like looking at what we're buying. I want to see 85 to 90% of my cart filled with all different types of diverse veggies and fruits to really support that gut microbiome and in my liver in particular, especially with the cruciferous vegetables and the bitter type of greens. And then we're a big fan of fermented foods. We've got kimchi, we've got sauerkraut in all different varieties. We have carrot kraut, we've got beet kraut, we've got all kinds. And what we know is that fermented veggies are absolutely going to help to populate that estrobolome as well. And so I think a lot of it can be going down with what we're consuming, especially that fiber and those fermented veggies. If you're going to drink kombucha, make sure it's low sugar. A lot of kombucha is heavy on the sugar. And then bringing in some other lovely biome loving foods, foods that are rich in omegas, like fatty fishes, foods that are going to, like bone broth, are phenomenal for the gut microbiome. And then other things that I recommend as well is going to be, I think digestive enzymes are very, very necessary every single day before meals, and probiotic and prebiotic foods, again, the fermented foods, and even considering taking a probiotic as well. And so just being very conscious around how you build your plate to really support your gut and your liver, I think it's so critical. And as a side effect, as the extra bonus is when you set up your gut and liver for success, you're also going to your blood sugar for success as well. So those are the things that I would be recommending, is just like, how do I build a plate that is gut friendly, that is going to support my microbiome, especially if we're seeing signs of estrogen dominance, which naturally is going to happen as we start to scale into perimenopause, and progesterone and testosterone are lower and lower, just as the way that the natural progression of our hormones are. At some point, estradiol is going to be unopposed. And the more that we can ensure that our gut and our liver detoxification pathways are working properly, phase 1 all the way to 3, we can ensure that we're really clearing a lot of those excess estrogen metabolites. And so, I always say that's one of the first areas I like to look at is blood sugar, gut, and liver health. If we're starting to notice that vital sign of our ovulatory cycle is showing symptoms of, severe PMS symptoms, heavy bleeding, maybe you're experiencing even anemia, fatigue, just not like, again, feeling disrupted in that time of your cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. All good things. And so we talked a lot about blood sugar balance and gut health. And I know there are other things too, like environmental factors, but you have a summit coming up and you talk a lot about the environmental factors too, right? And that summit. So
we do.
Tell everyone where they can learn more about you, learn about your summit, your book, everything that's going on.
Yeah, the summit is specifically, it's the Hormone Relief Summit. It's really tackling for women in our 30s and a little bit older, because that's where I find the changes happen. Not to say that it can't support women in their 20s too, but really, like, what are the changes? How can we pivot and move forward? And it's looking at all the root causes. It's looking at the environmental root causes, the stress root causes, we talk a lot about metabolism and blood. So if that was interesting, you want more, I've got the best experts in the world. And Trevor's going to be on it as well. I'm interviewing her later on today. And so you just can go to reliefsummit.com. I know Trevor's going to have a link as well. So we'll just ensure that Trevor's got a link for her show notes. And also the podcast. I've got a podcast as well. It's called Essentially You, and it's all about helping women become the CEO of their health. My books are on Amazon if you want to go check them out, but those are the two places that are free and have got a plethora of content that is designed to serve you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariza, for joining me today, and all of your enthusiasm, energy, and obviously you care so much about this topic.
I do. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast, be sure to share it with the women in your life and rate and review the show. And to learn all about balancing your hormones, join us for the Hormones, Health, and Harmony 9-part documentary series at hormoneseries.com.